So Vas, I had an idea, and that was
Another idea.
another idea. Okay, and you said, look, it's been done loads of times before,
Yes.
straight away. So the idea was we're going to have a proper low pressure failure and a high pressure failure, and which would drain the tank the fastest. And you said, it's been done online, it's there already,
Yep.
loads of times. And I said, wait. What about if you're only wearing side mount? We use you because I'm better with the camera. That was the reason, no?
Wanted to save the footage.
Yeah, exactly. Want to make sure the footage comes back. And we actually take you down to a depth that a lot of recreational divers can still go to and do. But you'd be in side mount configuration, so you've got redundancy. But we're going to actually get to around 36 meters.
Yes.
Inside a wreck, could be outside, but we chose inside. And we were going to basically partially cut your regulator hose you're breathing from. Then we're going to full cut it. And what we were looking for is if you could breathe it, that was the first idea, right? Would you have to switch straight away?
Sure.
How long would that cylinder actually last for? Would it even be useful to breathe from for that short time you may have? And then I said, you're like, yeah, sure, no problem. I can just swim out on the other tank, right?
I don't think I said that, but keep going.
Did you not? Okay.
Keep going.
So that was what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I thought, then I thought, wait a minute. On a high pressure hose, you're supposed to get about 20 minutes.
Sure.
Now, if we're out on the Carwella, that's a 5-minute swim, give or take. You know, bit of ascent to do, a little bit of an extended safety stop, let's say. But you should be out in the water in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, you wouldn't have a full cylinder. You probably have about 160, 170 bar, somewhere around there, because you've used some. We basically got you near the stairs and decided to cut on your only working cylinder now, your high pressure hose.
Yes, I think I remember that.
Yeah, this was the plan. And then the answer would be could you still make it back now with a high pressure hose failure?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we initially did the idea, initially it was always about time. It was always about, can it actually, how long do we sit and watch it and prove, with a stopwatch? But I think the difference, which I eventually understood, was that we were trying to show the practicality of that. Does it actually allow you to get something done? What are the limitations? What is it you need to do? So I think there was ended up with quite a few little separate parts of that. When you get gas loss through a hose, does it still deliver to the second stage, for example? This was a question mark which we had. For sure, once it's fully cut, well, the second stage doesn't exist, there isn't one there. And then perhaps we can talk a bit about, is it viable to breathe from the actual hose itself? You've obviously got options, shut down, you've potentially got, the valve fluttering, which is available.
Yeah.
I think then the other part of the question was, well, how likely are these failures to occur? How easy is it to cut a hose? Is it the sort of thing that happens really easily if you snag the hose on part of the wreck?
Well,
does it actually catch?
Going through learning to dive, I mean, I was led to believe that they're pretty fragile things.
Yes.
You really got to be careful, look after them, don't scrape them. I also believe that, MyFlex, that material, the lightweight hose, is stronger or better than rubber. Rubber might break a bit easier. I was led to believe all these different things.
All the differences.
Yeah. So I thought they were probably, quite easy to cut or break.
I think the other thing was about the actual disruption to you, the amount of bubbles that are being created. Are you getting disoriented? Are they running under your body and lifting you up? Can you actually see, with bubbles everywhere?
Yeah.
That was the other part of it. So, I think it was more than just watching a tank for 20 minutes with the SPG draining. It actually made some of it addressing all of these question marks. And I think it was it's a valuable experiment to go and do. And I think that, there's a couple of different angles to it. If I think about the educational side, which we'll go into, and we'll talk about each of the separate parts of that story. I've got to think about me as a diver as well now, and I've got to think about what I learned from it, so that if I'm making a dive, now I've had dives where, yes, I'll have a leak from the second stage, you can shut that down and make yourself home, or you can choose to flutter it for a while. But now we're talking about, you know, being what was probably 10, 15 minutes away from home. The ascent part wasn't necessarily a worry, and because we were staying within the no decompression limit, and we that was a part of the stage one, if you like.
Yeah.
But it was more about, well, you know, am I going to be able to do this for that long? How am I going to perform? What will be my mental state while that's happening? Because for sure, now I'm going to go and make those dives again, I'm going to have a very different confidence level. I'm going to actually be happier that pretty much whatever happens now. I think I made a dive there a couple of years ago. I had some other equipment failures. So now I'm looking at really a set of compound problems. Can I handle almost everything going wrong?
Yeah.
But while being solo as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, for sure, I want my teammate there and they're going to be in a better situation. But now I know that I can handle all of those problems because I've got a configuration that lets me do that.
Sure. And the likelihood of having two of those failures on any one dive, it's just, on different cylinders, it's just never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean you start going so far outside the actual statistical chances that, you know, we're talking about a very small theoretical piece.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you make a dive plan, you know, when we talk about that, yes, there are some things that you can conceive of happening, current, visibility, you know, losing the bearing, let's say. But, you know, how far outside that do you go? And, you know, I hear people talking, you know, about every random possibility, you know, meteor strikes, for example, and even once, what if the aliens land in the car park? So, you know, there is a sensible point, you know, to cut off at. And I think we've probably gone to that point more or less now.
Yeah, and for me, I didn't want to just make a video in a confined water bay or a swimming pool or something, the same kind of depth and clarity. It wanted to be on a real dive.
Yep.
And since we already made that other video where we had a failure on your wing, very unfortunate. But you did well with that. So I thought, you know, Vas, he's the man for the job. If anyone is going to have his hoses cut and stand to make a chance at back.
Yeah, it's a bit like being a stuntman, isn't it?
That'd
really?
be you. So at first you said, nah, don't think that'd be possible.
Yeah.
And then really afterwards you didn't have a choice.
Oh, I think that was it. I think it was having two people drag you into the water and actually tell you
kicking and screaming.
That's what you're going to be doing. No, I mean, I'll be honest and say that, you know, when I knew we were going to film it, now we'd obviously prepped some of that stuff before. We'd obviously made all the tests in advance. We knew what was actually going to happen in every other scenario we'd run it in before. But of course that morning, I was thinking actually now we're going to take it to the full depth rather than just the training stuff that we'd done for. And I mean, I would be a little bit out of my mind if I didn't have some worry, right?
Sure.
But of course, you know, I knew a little bit about the sequence and the staging, and I had a chance to think about it. And, you know, what it's kind of shown me is now to actually apply that really to more of the dives that you'll do. Well, what if this happened here? What if it happened there? Could you do it? What would you do? What would the response be? So it was a super interesting thing, like I said before. And, you know, next time, yes, it's going to be you. All right, okay. When the next camera comes out, it will be me now holding that.
No, I doubt that.
Well, you won't get so much choice. But no. So actually, in the end of the story for me was that I think we ended up with more learning opportunities from it than just watching an SPG needle draining. And I think that was the takeaway.
Well, that was also interesting, wasn't it? Because we did actually decide to put two SPGs on the side that was going to fail, that we knew would be cutting away one of them. And when we did that, it actually went from the 160 bar right down to about 60, 70 straight away. So what it told me is that the gauge we had on there, it was compromising some way the high pressure side.
Yes.
You know, I don't know exactly how it works in the first stage that does that. It wasn't showing nothing, but it was showing about 50, 60.
It's now become an open system, hasn't it? It's not completely closed now.
Yeah. Now, I knew at that point that can't be accurate. There's no way you lose that much gas just because you've cut the hose.
Sure.
Yes, you get a bit of a noise, but then the bubbles are a very slow stream. So you definitely had still a similar pressure at that point, and we knew it would take so long to drain. Now, what was interesting is that the gauge later on, it did actually get to near zero, but it didn't go down. It kind of just dropped all the way.
Absolutely.
And the one time you look at it, but we actually found that you were still having a bleed. Actually, once you successfully made it to the surface and out, right?
Even back on land, it was still emptying gas out of the cylinder. And I think that's just down to the mechanics of the system. The fact is now it's not a closed space anymore. There's now leakage, so you don't get that chance to build up. So that's really showing that in that scenario, that SPG isn't the only thing. It has to be the gas plan that's getting you.
That's another thing, because some people, they want to use transmitters now, right? And they want to use, they're saying, well, I should put another gauge on there, a mechanical gauge, in case it fails. Now, if it just fails electronically, I can kind of understand that, because you'd have the pressure.
Yes.
But if it fails because of some kind of flood or an O-ring compromise,
Yes. And the port's now open.
and the port's now open, you're going to have the same problem that we just experienced. So actually, we're kind of addressing a lot of things in that video.
Yeah, I think you make a good point as well, though. I mean, the story about having the second SPG, one mechanical analog, and then obviously one electronic transmitter.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to think about the benefit that you're gaining versus the additional risks that you're carrying to go off and do that. I mean, we saw that having two SPGs didn't actually help me.
Sure.
And we were ending the dive anyway. So adding a mechanical on top of the transmitter, I think at the end of the story was that you're just going to introduce 3, maybe 4 new O-rings.
Yeah.
Which didn't seem to really be adding any value. You know, there's no additional benefit, because on the swim home, I almost don't need to know the gas. I've just got to get home.
Yeah.
You know, the gas is the gas at that point.
Sure.
I have to trust in my training to have planned a dive within a sensible set of limits, don't I?
Absolutely. And we, with that said, any compromise or any failure, you've always generally planned to have reserve in another tank anyway.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, for you, we were unlucky, very unlucky, because we'd compromised an entire cylinder prior to that failure.
Well, I mean, that's true, but I think, you know, if you look at the strategies that we had open to us, which we'll kind of go into more details, and the fact that you don't have to just put up with the gas bleed, you can obviously manipulate the valves, you can regulate the gas loss to a degree.
Sure.
Of course, you've got less options on the low pressure side, but we ended up with a lot more options on the high pressure side. So that lasted far longer in the end.
And when you had the high pressure failure, did it in any way affect your regulator you were breathing from?
No, there was zero breathing change, at least none that I could perceive anyway. So it wasn't the case for me that I was feeling, you know, starved of air or anything.
Yeah, you didn't change anything on the regulator.
No, and I think also the fact that you knew from every test that's ever been done, you had a reasonable amount of time, 20 minutes, 18 minutes, whatever that is. Well, that shouldn't put the fear into you instantly at that moment. You know, that's really telling you that your plan needs to put you 18 minutes away from the next piece of gas.
Yeah.
Whether that's the surface, whether that's your next bottle,
Sure.
whatever that is.
Sure. What was interesting for me as well was the fact that because this was all done in side mount and you had that redundancy, if you would get any one of those failures,
Yes.
you'd still be able to make a safe, controlled way back home.
Yes.
And I think that if you looked at that with another diver who's in a single cylinder, they're just not going to have that flexibility.
Well, I mean, that's always a question that, you know, you take a popular dive, which, you know, it's in recreational limits, 40 meters in the sand, 38, 37 inside the wreck, maybe with a little bit of a route to get through it.
Yeah.
And if I look at how efficient some recreational divers move, and if I think about the time that they've actually got, and then I say, well, okay, yes, they've got time to get through a wreck. How far away is their buddy from them at that moment? How aware is their buddy that potentially there is an issue with somebody else?
Yeah.
And I think that it starts to really bring into question the safety of making that kind of dive in a single cylinder.
Sure.
And, you know, so for me, I'm diving the side mount configuration for kind of all of those benefits, rather than just the comfort and the balance and the trim that it brings me.
Yeah, and for me, I was just, the point I was just trying to get at on there was that you can make this nice controlled ascent back, well, you haven't got to worry too much because you've had that one failure. There's still gas in the cylinder. You probably can use that.
Yes.
So if we're talking about a normal failure, that would be a free-flowing regulator.
Yeah.
Right? That's more normal. Or the BCD hose connection stayed connected. You know, so you had to disconnect it.
Sure.
And then you're just orally inflating now. Any of those reasons are probably enough to turn that dive and be on your way home. But you're certainly not in an emergency state. You're just finishing the dive as normal. Whereas somebody in a single cylinder, you know, they're going to be a little more stressed because they know this is their only one source of gas.
Sure.
Anything else happens to it, they don't have the technical training that probably a side-mount or two-cylinder dive would have. They're going to be going straight up. And this is where you get people having real problems, right? Because they're talking about an ascent from 35 meters at this point. And if they're not that good at ascending anyway...
Well, it's a compounded problem, isn't it? I mean, you've got a bit of overhead to contend with. You know, you've got the buddy system, you know, or the teammate awareness as well. You know, and they tend to be some of the things that aren't always considered enough. You know, it's quite happy, I'm going to go and check out the propeller, or I'm going to go and check out the pretty fish, whatever that is. You know, and it really does raise the issue of how far away from your buddy you should really let yourself be.
Sure.
You know, I've heard some interesting stories of, it's okay, he's over there, he's my friend. You know, I know who he is, it's okay, you know.
Yeah.
And these are people really that I don't think have maybe appreciate all of the reasons to stay together. And what I'm hoping is that, you know, it's experiments like this and the kind of education that brings that changes a little bit of those diving habits.
Yeah, yeah.